Welcome into Steelers Talk by Chat Sports, presented by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Jack Sperry, and we got some pretty surprising news in the National Football League here today, as quarterback Brendan Sorsby has been informed by the National Football League that the NFL will not be holding a supplemental draft this year, which means Sorsby will be ineligible to join an NFL team for the 2026 NFL season. Now, before we break down kind of this whole situation, what it means for both Sorsby and the Pittsburgh Steelers moving forward, make sure you guys click that subscribe button, because big stories like this is exactly why you guys click that subscribe button. And if the Steelers have any more big news items throughout the course of the offseason as we get ready for the 2026 campaign, we're going to have you guys covered with a video as fast as we possibly can right here on Steelers Talks. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button to never miss a thing. All right, so let's get right into it here, man. Ian Rappaport reported today a little bit after 12:30 that the NFL has informed teams that it will not be holding a supplemental draft, meaning Texas Tech quarterback Brendan Sorsby will not be eligible to enter the NFL in 2026. The CBA allows the league to decide whether or not to hold a supplemental draft, and this year it won't. So obviously this is pretty big news, because a lot of people were expecting a supplemental draft to be held this year, because Sorsby was one of the bigger names at the quarterback position in particular in recent memory. Rappaport continued on, saying with no supplemental draft in 2026, 2023 was the last time it was held, and 2019 was the last time a player was selected. So this is something that is quite rare, but with a player of Sorsby's kind of name status and all that different stuff, a lot of people were expecting a supplemental draft to be held this year, and for an NFL team to wager a draft pick in next year's NFL draft in order to obtain the former Cincinnati Bearcat quarterback. And then Pete Thamel put out the response here from Jeffrey Kessler, who is the attorney for Brendan Sorsby, saying, quote, "It is a violation of the CBA and the law. We will pursue this immediately with the NFL Players Association." Well, it's kind of hard to do that when Brendan Sorsby's not an NFL player right now, right? So listen, man, this saga has been completely nuts from the start. All right, once we heard that Sorsby was placing thousands of bets, many of which were against his own team and his own offense, this has kind of gone off the rails with various legal battles. Of course, with the NCAA trying to get Sorsby back eligible, and then he enters the supplemental draft, or says he's going to, and now we get the latest chapter here with the NFL saying, nope, you are not going to be entering the NFL this year. We are not going to hold the supplemental draft. And listen, man, I think Sorsby is going to do his best to try and fight the NFL on this. I mean, they've already put out a statement saying that they're going to do so, but I think they're very unlikely to beat the NFL on this. Number one, Sorsby's not an NFL player, so he's not a part of the collective bargaining agreement. And then in the collective bargaining agreement in Article 6, it very clearly states, quote, "In any league year in which the NFL deems it appropriate, there may also be a supplemental draft." So the NFL has the power to decide, are we going to have a supplemental draft this year or not? And, I think that Sorsby and his representation are going to have a very difficult time trying to get around that. So essentially what the NFL is doing here, guys, is that they just suspended Brendan Sorsby for an entire year. Instead of having a team draft him in the supplemental draft and then after the fact be like, actually, he's getting suspended this year, they're just telling NFL teams straight up, this guy's not playing on our league this year, and we're going to give ourselves a whole calendar year to kind of figure out if we even want this guy in our league, period. And if we do, we're going to have the time to kind of properly investigate it, all that different stuff. Because Sorsby, the stuff that he did, is pretty darn serious. Like, he bet against his own team and own offense at Cincinnati, again, guys, as well as a number of other sporting events, which is not allowed when you are a college athlete, obviously. But obviously that means he won't be a Steeler this year in terms of how it affects the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've been talking about a bunch of different rumors here over the last several days and weeks. Even Tom McShay said the Steelers could consider giving up a first-round pick for him in the supplemental draft, which I think would have been way, way, way too much. And I don't think the Steelers would have done that. And honestly, I don't think they would have been in on him. They just drafted a quarterback that they like in Drew Aller. They have Will Howard in the building as well that apparently they're relatively high on. We'll see how he does in training camp this year. But I really do not think the Steelers would have landed Sorsby regardless. But it is noteworthy, obviously, because we won't be having that supplemental draft. Now, coming up here on Steelers Talk, I'm going to be breaking down what's next for Sorsby and then what's next for the Pittsburgh Steelers at the quarterback position. But before we get into the rest of today's show, I want to tell you about our presenting sponsor, sponsor here on Steelers Talk, which is Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. The World Cup is finally here, so you can get your soccer lineups in over the next several weeks. So if that's not really your thing, Prize Picks has a number of other sports to choose from as well, like baseball and more, to enhance your sports viewing experience this summer. You can even look ahead to next year's football season here, where this Prize Picks projection, I'm taking the more on passing yards for Aaron Rodgers, the more on receiving touchdowns for DK Metcalf, and the more on interceptions for last year's Defensive Rookie of the Year, Browns linebacker Carson Schlesinger. This particular projection can get me $105 on our friends at Prize Picks on just a $20 entry fee in what Prize Picks calls a power play. So you have to get all 3 of these projections correct to be able to cash in, but if you do so, you come away with more winnings. So download the Prize Picks app today to join the fun, guys, and use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with our friends at Prize Picks. As always, guys, please play responsibly. Click the link in the comments and description to download the app today. And a big thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. So listen, man, Sorsby can also continue to fight for NCAA eligibility. I assume maybe that's an avenue that they end up going down. But the fact that Sorsby was entering or was planning to enter the NFL Supplemental Draft tells us that they didn't really necessarily expect to win that legal battle with the NCAA, and they weren't really expecting Sorsby to be eligible for this upcoming college football season. So we'll see what ends up happening in that regard. But I would say, kind of like the NFL thing, that also seems unlikely at this point. I would probably say Sorsby's more likely to play in a college football game this year than in an NFL football game. But right now, by far the most likely scenario here is that Sorsby will not be playing any football this year unless he decides to go to like the Canadian Football League or something like that. They're in the middle of their season right now, so you'd have to sign with the team like right now. But, there's just not going to be a lot of opportunities, in my opinion, for Sorsby to actually play before he enters the 2027 NFL Draft next year. So if I'm him, man, I'm getting with one of these top QB coaches, whether it's Quincy Avery, whether it's John Beck, one of these other, Jordan Palmer. There's a number of these quarterback, quote-unquote, gurus, the coaches that the draft prospects work with throughout the year. And if I were him, man, I would just get with one of these top QB coaches, work on my fundamentals, try and fix my footwork, learn under center footwork, really get good at that stuff so that I am ready to go when I'm drafted in the 2027 NFL Draft. And I'm guessing that's probably what he's going to end up doing. And I do think he will be impressive when he enters the NFL Draft next year and when he's at the combine, if he gets invited, all that different stuff. He's got a very strong arm. He's a big body guy. I think that he will be impressive in that kind of area once we get to the draft process next year. But at this point, man, after everything that's happened, and Sorsby now having to take a year off essentially from football, I think he's going to be lucky to be a day 2 draft pick. It's still possible, in my opinion, but it's still, especially because of next year's quarterback class, man, it's going to be tough to crack that ceiling and try and get into that day 2 conversation. And according to Dane Brugler from The Athletic, Sorsby wanted to come out this year, but NFL teams, gave him the feedback that he was going to be a 3rd-round pick. So he decided to go back to school, and then the whole scandal thing happened. Then he tried to enter the NFL. So if he was a round 3 pick in the eyes of the NFL people heading into this year's draft, I mean, you add on top of this scandal as well as, all the different stuff going on with him, and taking the year off, and you add on top of that next year's quarterback class, which could be awesome. I mean, there's a number of QBs that could come out next year that could also come back to school, but Dante Moore will be coming out next year. Lenora Sellers will be coming out next year. Same thing goes for Trinidad Chambliss. All right, I'm guessing that a number of these other QBs are going to eventually come out as well. I'm sure, Arch Manning, Mestamaker, Sayin, Carr, Mensah, Lindsey, and Levitt, some combination of that group is going to be coming out as well. So it's supposed to be a pretty heavy and a quarterback top-heavy draft next year, which is not going to be good news for Brendan Sorsby, who is obviously going to be looking to be taken as high as he possibly can, but I don't like his prospects in that at this current state and where his career is at right now. Now, as for the Pittsburgh Steelers, how do they move forward here? Well, obviously, like we just mentioned earlier in the show, I don't think the Steelers were really going to make a play for Sorsby, so it's still, everything according to plan, right? Will Howard, Drew Aller are the younger quarterback options in this room right now. We'll see if Howard ends up making the roster. Aller is for sure going to be spending the year on the roster, learning from Aaron Rodgers. Mike McCarthy, trying to fix some of the issues that he has coming into the league and hopefully developing into a starting caliber quarterback for this team in the future. And then once they get to next spring, this team's going to reassess the position. We're all expecting Aaron Rodgers to retire. We'll see if Will Howard or Drew Aller or both of them get a chance to play this year, and if so, how they play. We'll see how the quarterback kind of class shapes up in the 2027 draft class. We'll see where the Steelers are drafting. There's a lot of variables here that are going to kind of determine what the Steelers are going to do at the quarterback position next offseason. But absolutely, drafting a quarterback early in the NFL draft next year is still on the table, right? It certainly depends on where they're drafting, how many of these top-end quarterback talents actually end up entering the NFL draft and all that different stuff. But also keep in mind the Steelers might have an additional first-round pick if they end up trading Mike Tomlin to a different NFL team next offseason. So they got a lot of options in terms of how they want to address this. They could go with Drew Aller. They could go with Will Howard. They could go with a rookie quarterback. They could bring in, maybe an inexpensive veteran again if they really want to do that. But, and when it comes to Sorsby and going into the 2027 NFL draft, I do not think he's going to be on Pittsburgh's short list, okay? I think that the Steelers, if they're going to draft a quarterback early next year, they're going to want somebody that can play relatively quickly, all right? And Sorsby, I do not think is that guy. And with the gambling stuff, I'm not sure if he's the guy that the Rooneys and Omar and Mike want representing this organization, frankly. And I don't think they're going to be interested in kind of that late day 2, early day 3 quarterback conversation. I think if they take a quarterback next year, it's going to be early, and it's going to be their guy that they think is going to be the next franchise quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And after all that's happened with Sorsby this offseason, I don't think that they're going to view him in that way once we get to next spring. But predict it for me down there in the comments section. Will Pittsburgh draft a quarterback in round 1 next spring? I know there's still a lot of things that need to happen before we can really accurately answer this question, guys. But sitting here today, June 23rd, 2026, give me a yes or a no on this question down there in the comments section. And that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. I don't know about you guys, but I'm happy to not have to talk about Brendan Sorsby any longer here on this channel. We can now shift our focus to other things here on Steelers Talk and really shift our focus to the start of the 2026 NFL season for the Black and Gold. If you guys want our extensive daily coverage on this football team for free every single day, make sure you guys click that subscribe button and join our family today.